Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the regular meeting of the Board of Directors of Vallecitos Water District on Wednesday, December 1st, 2021 at 5 p.m. Meeting in person at the district office here in San Marcos. Director Boyd Hodgson, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pleasure.
Do we need to take attendance? I think that's afterwards.
Okay.
Yep.
We'll do it right after the pledge.
Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, now we will do a roll call. If you can enter your attendance, please. Okay, let the record reflect that all the board members, with the exception of Director Hernandez, are present.
Can I do it one more time?
Oh, yes. Great. Thank you. There's been no emergency additions to the agenda, and so I'll entertain a motion to adopt tonight's agenda.
So,
We have a motion by Director Boyd Hodgson. Is there a second?
second?
Second by Director Pinnock. Thank you. If we can cast our votes, please. There we go. Director Boyd Hodgson. Okay. And the motion to adopt tonight's agenda passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay. Let's move on to public comments. Persons wishing to address a matter not on the agenda may be heard at this time. However, no action will be taken until the matter is placed on a future agenda in accordance to board policy. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes. A request to speak form is required to be submitted to the executive secretary prior to the start of the meeting, if possible. Public comments should start by stating name, address, and topic, and the board is not permitted during this time to enter into dialogue with the speaker. And I do have one speaker, Mrs. Gail Martin.
Hello, I'm a tall person. Can you hear me?
It's not, doesn't sound like it's piped through the
No.
Am I close enough?
Is the button red?
Can you hear me now?
No, that red light should go on. when-
Not yet.
There you go.
There you go.
Yes, good evening. I'm Gail Martin, 1401 El Norte Parkway here in San Marcos. Good evening, directors. Wanted to ask, since we are having the meetings here in person, that it reflect on the website where it indicates that people can join via Zoom. I would like that icon be shown to say that when you participate via Zoom, you cannot speak. You can only listen and observe. You do not get that language until you open the agenda and read into the long paragraph about COVID and how we are taking precautions. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention to please update the website so that that visual of the Zoom does reflect that it means that you will not be able to speak. Thank you.
Great, thank you for bringing that to our attention. I think that's reasonable.
Yep, I have a note. I'll talk with IT tomorrow.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Martin. Okay, we'll move on to tonight's consent calendar. All matters listed under the consent calendar are expected to be routine and non-controversial, to be acted upon by the board by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a board member or member of the public requests that a particular item be removed from the consent calendar, in which case it will be considered separately under action items. And before we entertain a motion, I am going to ask that we pull item 1.6 at the general manager's request, and then he will speak after we vote on everything else, unless there's any other items that any of the board members would like to discuss separately.
Is it possible to have the agenda put up on the screen? I'm not able to access it on my computer for some reason. Can I have the agenda on top of on the screen?
don't you just hit stop share, because it's for another item.
Right, do we need to look at any one specific thing?
I like to follow along.
No, I know, I
And
just
I
didn't know if you were,
can't access it.
for this specific item, I didn't know if you wanted to pull anything.
Would you mind reading what that item is that you're pulling, please?
Oh, yes, so item 1.6 is the cybersecurity agreement. Authorization to execute a 3-year agreement with SecureWorks for security operations services.
Thank you.
I'll go ahead and move approval of consent calendar items 1.1 through 1.5.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second?
Okay, we have a motion by Director Eltharp, a second by Director Boyd Hodgson to approve items 1.1 through 1.5 of the consent calendar. We can cast our votes as soon as they come up. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. We're making Patrick work a lot this evening. Sorry, Patrick. And then I'll turn it over to General Manager Pruitt to tell us why he wanted us to pull off item 1.6.
Yeah, thank you, President Sanella. So after posting the agenda for tonight's meeting, we identified the need for a slight modification to the insurance requirements, insurance requirement language in the proposed agreement. The original staff recommendation was to authorize the general manager to execute a 3-year agreement with SecureWorks, and this is for IT security services. I'm suggesting a slight modification to the recommendation to read, authorize the general manager to execute a 3-year agreement and insurance addendum with SecureWorks in a form approved by the general manager and reviewed and approved as to form by legal counsel. So this would allow staff to make minor modifications to the agreement and the insurance language in a manner that would benefit the district, so it's all to our benefit. And all changes would be approved by Best Best and Krieger. Once Best Best and Krieger has approved the changes, I would then execute the agreement. I would review it first, of course. The item would not come back before the board, so the minor modification is you're authorizing me to sign the agreement, but we need to do a little bit of work behind the scenes with SecureWorks. And that's the company. So SecureWorks has been consulted about the changes, and they're fine with them. It just, we have to do a little bit of work to get the final document. So that's all it is. So for the board's consideration.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, comments? Motion to, is there a motion for item 1.6?
So moved?
Okay, thank you. Is there a second?
Second?
Okay, thank you. We have a motion by Director Pinnick and a second by Director Boyd Hodgson to approve item 1.6 as presented by our general manager, and we'll go ahead and cast our votes. And the motion passes unanimously. Okay, that brings us to action items, actually. And we'll come up to item 2.1, which is our annual board transition. General Manager Pruitt, would you kick us off and give us some background on this item?
Yeah, I will. But before I do that, Patrick, is there a way to stop sharing the other item that's up there?
I am on that staff table and I'm saying stop sharing. And
Okay.
well, let me bring
Well,
back.
so Patrick, you keep working on that and I'll jump into this item. So item 2.1 is the board transition. So this is the annual board transition, occurs every December, where the board appoints a new vice president and president. Our practice has been to rotate these positions annually. And if the board were to follow the past practice, Director Eltharp would be the president and Director Hernandez would become the vice president. I would suggest that the incoming office holders become effective at our next meeting on December 15th, and that would allow President Sanella to preside over the remainder of today's meeting. It's a little bit different than we've done in the past, but sometimes it's a little bit awkward to switch right in the middle of the meeting. I would like to point out that historically we've made the committee appointments and the outside agency assignments at the same meeting, and this year I'm trying something a little bit different. So we're doing the president, vice president tonight, and then on the 15th we'll have the committee assignments and outside agency representative appointments. And that will give the incoming president time to reach out to the other directors and find out what it is you'd like to be on and develop their own recommended appointments. So if that's acceptable to the board, I'd be looking for direction as to who will be our president and vice president starting on December 15th.
Okay, thank you. Any comments, questions? Okay, if there's no discussion, then I'll make a motion that we I don't know if we need to do them separately, Glenn, or not, but make a motion that we appoint Director Elitharp as president for the 2022 year, starting effective December 15th, and Director Hernandez as vice president for the same term.
I think we
If
can
we
do
can
them
do them
all
all
in
at
one
once.
motion.
Is there a second?
I can second that motion.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion before we vote? Okay, we have a motion by President Sinella and a second by Director Pinnock. If we can have our votes up, please. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Congratulations, Director Elitharp.
Thank you.
Looking forward to a good 2022 under your leadership. Do you want to just maybe say a few words?
Sure.
Or give us some direction as to
Yeah,
appointments and
I'll
stuff?
keep this to 30 minutes because that's what I've been told. No, I was
Appreciate that.
I was honored to serve as president in 2017, and I got to say I'm very honored to serve in 2022 as well. And yeah, I think I've said it before, but I think my goals is for the board would be to provide staff with the tools and resources needed to implement our strategic plan. And the other big piece, I think, is as a board is conducting our business in a transparent, inclusive manner. And I've followed the example of our outgoing president in doing that. He did a very good job this past year. So, and the other thing I'd like to do is strengthen our relationships with some of the outside agencies, including the Water Authority and our other member agencies of the Water Authority. So, thank you very much.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. And will you be reaching out to us for interest in
Yes.
other appointments?
Thanks for reminding me. If you all could probably email me, it'd probably be the best way to indicate your interest in the various committees and other assignments.
Great. Any questions of our incoming president or comments or?
No questions of our incoming, but just a thank you to Mike. I mean, I know 2021's been a crazy year, so thank you.
Yeah, it didn't start off as well. I mean, it wasn't too much of a surprise given 2020, but thank you.
Thank you, appreciate what you do.
It's good to be back in person.
Yeah, just one more thing. I'd just like to say, we've talked about how our staff, in particular our general manager, got us through this pandemic period, but I want to give a lot of praise to our outgoing president as well. I know he was in frequent contact with the general manager all through this time period. And I think he had a big part to do with it as well. So thank you.
Well, thank you all.
Agreed.
Okay, let's keep this party going.
You're doing great.
We'll move on to item 2.2, our fiscal year 2021 audit and comprehensive annual financial report.
Yeah, I'll kick that off, President Sinella, and then I'll turn it over to Wes. So every year we are required to conduct an audit of our financial statements and to prepare a financial report. So Wes Owen will provide an overview of this item, and you'll also hear from our auditor, Shannon Ayala from Davis Farr. Just as a reminder, the board, acting as the Finance Corporation, will also consider this item at the conclusion of our regular meeting. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to, I think, Wes, but it may be Shannon, so.
Thank you, Glenn. Good evening, President Snell, members of the board. So yeah, I'm actually just going to introduce Shannon to start this presentation off. She's going to go through the audit process and talk about the results this year, and then I'll give a brief as possible presentation on the comprehensive annual financial report. So with that, Shannon, welcome.
Thank you, Wes. I'm just going to share my screen here. Let me know if you all can see the PowerPoint okay?
Yep.
Okay. So as was mentioned, we completed the audit for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2021, and we issued an unmodified opinion dated November 12th, 2021. That's on page 49 of your agenda report. This indicates that the financial statements and footnotes are presented fairly in all material respects and in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. The unmodified opinion is also the highest level of opinion that can be received on the financial statements. We also issued the communication to those in governance, which is on page 139 of the agenda, and the government auditing standards opinion, and that's on page 137 of the agenda. I'm happy to report that the finance staff was well prepared for the audit. I'd also like to indicate that we did reduce our materiality levels this year by approximately $170,000, and we didn't have any material audit adjustments detected during the audit, nor did we have any other audit adjustments detected. We also did not have any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in internal controls noted. So in addition to our standard audit approach of testing all the material asset and liability accounts and doing revenue and analytical reviews on revenues and expenses, we also did some focus testing in construction in progress and contracts. So we tested approximately 85% of the construction in progress balance and ensured that those projects were properly classified as construction in progress, or if were completed, moved over to an in-service asset. And then for contract testing, we selected 5 of the largest contracts for the district and ensured the contracts were approved by the board. The contract was current, payments did not exceed the contracted amounts, and the invoices were also calculated in accordance with the contract. And I'm happy to report there were no exceptions noted. Lastly, I'd just like to let you know that the district does receive the GFOA award has received it in the past couple of years. And on last year's report, the GFOA did not have any comments or notes for improvement on the financial statements reported. And that's the first time I've seen that in my 20 years of auditing. So kudos to the team on preparation of the financial statements. And with that, I can answer any questions that anyone has about the audit process or anything in particular.
Thank you, Shannon. Wes, did you want to go next, or would you want to wait to see if there's any questions of Shannon?
Actually, if you have questions of Shannon, that's fine. I'm going to go through the financial statements, but this is your opportunity to ask the auditor questions.
There'll be, of course, an opportunity after Wes's presentation as well, but is there any questions at this time? Okay, Wes. Thank you,
All right.
Shannon.
Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening again. And first I want to start off by saying thank you to Shannon and her staff. They always do a great job, and they keep us on our toes, and they're very thorough in their procedures and their inquiries, their audit procedures and their inquiries, so we appreciate that. So now I'm going to talk about our comprehensive annual financial report, and I've gone through and I've tried to remove every reference to the CAFR, the previous acronym for it. Next year, that will be removed officially by GASB. I can't remember the statement number, but in the future, it will be referred to as the Annual Comprehensive Financial Report, or the ACFR. So I will not be saying the C word anymore. So this is our cover for the 2021 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. And I mentioned that our previous 2 covers were award-winning covers, so hopefully this can be a three-peat. So here's our 2021 cover. As the board probably knows, the basic requirement that Vallecitos has to do is we have to prepare basic financial statements, and we have to have them audited on an annual basis. The basic financial statements are included in the comprehensive annual financial report, and they're in the financial section. So, but in order for it to be a comprehensive annual financial report, we have to add the introductory section and the statistical section. So I'm going to start the presentation by going over the financial section, because it is kind of the meat and potatoes of the report itself. So the financial section is made up of the independent auditor's report, management's discussion analysis, or MD&A, the financial statements themselves, and those are made up of the statements of net position, statements of revenues, expenses, and changes in net position, and the statements of cash flows. After the financial statements, we have the notes of the financial statements, and then we have the required supplementary information. So that's the financial section. For this presentation, I'm going to focus on the management's discussion and analysis because it's kind of a summary of the financial statements, and it gives us an opportunity to brag about our accomplishments during the year. So the next slides I'll be going through are pages 19 through 25 of the annual financial report if you want to follow along. So to start off, here are some of the financial highlights for the year. Water sales increased by $4.3 million, mainly as a result of high temperatures and increases in demand. Capacity fees increased by $0.9 million, so this is good with construction pickup or collecting more capacity fees. And capital asset acquisitions increased to $14.9 million. It's a $2.7 million increase, so that just shows there's an uptick in construction in progress. Some more highlights, and these are, this is a summary of page 22 of the management discussion analysis. And we can see first that the district actually had a net loss before capital contributions for the year. And we had a net loss because, first of all, this includes depreciation of about $10 million. And second, and I'm going to mention this more during the presentation, but because we made the additional discretionary payment to fund the unfunded accrued liability, GASB 68 requires that we record that as an expense, which increases our pension expense for the year. So that $8 million increased the expenses this year and resulted in a net loss before contributions. But after capital contributions, we actually had an increase in total net position of $6.2 million. So continuing on the financial highlights, a couple things worth noting. First, the district paid down $3.6 million in long-term debt without incurring any additional debt in fiscal year 2021. And we paid off $4 million of the unfunded accrued liability through an additional discretionary payment. And that payment should result in additional estimated interest savings of $4.2 million. So next, and this is on page 21 of the NDNA, or the annual financial report. And this is, the next few slides, I'm going to go through some current year to prior year analysis. And here we can see in 2021, capital assets increased by $1.2 million, mainly as a result of the increase in construction in progress. Other assets increased by $3.3 million, and that's as a result of increases in our investment in Encino Wastewater Authority. Deferred outflows decreased by $6 million. Deferred outflows are kind of like a prepaid, and last year, and the majority of that prepaid is our additional discretionary payment, for at least for the Vallecitos. So last year, our prepaid was $8 million, and this year, because we made an additional discretionary payment of $4 million, the deferred outflows decreased. Non-current liabilities decreased by $10.3 million, and that's as a result of paying down the debt by $3.6 million, and also paying down the pension liability by the $8 million additional discretionary payment. And finally, deferred inflows increased by $4.5 million as a result of changes in actuarial assumptions as calculated by CalPERS. Next, I'm going to move on to more current year to prior year analysis, and this is page 22 of the annual financial report. I've broken it out into two sections to make it just more readable. This is the revenue section, which is the top. And we can see here that the district's major source of revenue are water sales at 43%, sewer service charges at 24%, ready to serve at 19%. And also noteworthy are that other revenues decreased by $1.6 million. And this was a result mainly of the decreases in investment earnings. With the Fed setting the interest rates at zero, it resulted in us having less interest earnings in fiscal year 2021. So this is the bottom portion of page 22. This shows the district's expenses this year to last year.
Wes, I'm sorry, can I interrupt you and ask a question about the previous slide?
Sure.
The reclaimed water 4%, that is the water that we treat at Meadowlark and sell to Carlsbad? Is that what that revenue is?
It's treated at Meadowlark and sold to Carlsbad and Alevenheim. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So this next slide is the bottom portion of page 22. It's the expense section. We can see here that water purchases increased by $2.9 million. This is in line with water sales, so increases in demand and rate increases from the Water Authority. Next, we can see that, and actually the next three, and I said that I would mention this again because this is related to the additional discretionary payment that was made. GASB 68 requires that we increase our pension expense by that $8 million. And as a result, a lot of the departments have increases in labor from the previous year. So last year, the GASB 68 entry was about $2.5 million. This year it was $8 million. So that increase is reflected in our expenses, and it actually resulted in an increase in G&A, general and administrative expenses. It also resulted engineering as well. The majority of engineering anyway, they did have some increases in outside services from condition assessments that were performed by the asset management group, but that was only like $250,000 of the increase. And then other expenses is a roll-up of several departments. That's, you know, IT, buildings and grounds, customer service, and other departments. And all of them were, major increases were in the pension expense from the ADP. So the next, this next slide shows page 23, or is going to talk about pages 23 and 24 of the MD&A and the district's restrictions, commitments, and limitations. And the biggest commitment of the district is our $48.9 million in long-term debt, and that was the balance as of June 30th, 2021. Other commitments of the district are we have capital projects that are contracted at least through the design phase. And some of those projects are listed in Note 11, and they are the San Marcos Interceptor Phase 2, MRF Aeration Basin, and the MRF Headworks Improvements. So this next slide is the final page of the MD&A, and this shows some of the economic factors that were included in preparing the fiscal year 2022 budget. We all went through that process, so we're very familiar with these factors, but the first one is the realized impacts from COVID. Now that we have an idea of the actual impacts of COVID, we're able to more appropriately incorporate that into the 2022 budget. And also a slow but steady increase in construction and development as we recover from the pandemic. And finally, increasing regulatory compliance. We're always trying to stay on top of the changes in the regulatory. So back to the content section. Next, we're going to talk about the introductory section of the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. The introductory section is made up of a letter of transmittal. And the letter of transmittal gives a little background on the district. It talks about the district as a reporting entity. It also talks about economic conditions and outlook, as well as our awards and achievements. And one of the awards for the district, again, was the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. We were, as Shannon mentioned, we got the award again in fiscal year 2020, our second year in a row. The rest of the introductory section is made up of our organization chart, our list of principal officials, and our service area map. So that's the introductory section. Next, I'll go into the statistical section. And the statistical section is made up of 16 tables with 10 years worth of information. And this just provides users with more information and really improves the transparency of our financial reporting. So these 16 tables are actually broken down into 5 focus areas. And the first focus area are financial trends. So the financial trends of the district, those are shown on tables 1 and 2, which is on pages 68 and 69 of the annual financial report. And those tables show the financial performance and well-being of the district by presenting 10 years of net position. The next focus area is the revenue capacity of the district. And that's shown in tables 3 through 9, or pages 70 through 75 of the annual financial report. And those tables show detailed information about revenues and expenses broken down by source for the last 10 years for the district. The next focus area is the debt capacity. So the district's debt capacity is shown on tables 10 and 11, or pages 76 and 77 of the annual financial report. And those tables show the outstanding debt by type and debt service coverage ratio of the district for the last 10 years. The fourth focus area is the demographic and economic information. That's shown in tables 12 through 14 and pages 78 through 80 of the annual financial report. And those tables show the assessed valuation, the population information, and the largest employers of the district for the last 10 years. And finally, the fifth focus area is the operating information of the district. shown in tables 15 and 16, or pages 81 and 82 of the annual financial report. And those tables show the employees by function and the capital assets by type of the district for the last 10 years. So the next steps. Next steps are we're going to complete our 79-page checklist detailing the requirements to qualify for the Certificate of Excellence in Reporting. I feel like Mike always brags about his 22,000 rows of data, and we always brag about our 79-page checklist. But it's true, we do have to look over this checklist every year to make sure we meet all the requirements and see if there are any changes. And Shannon mentioned it as well. So this year we will address all prior year comments from the GFOA. And as she mentioned, this year, and the GFOA actually assigns qualified CPAs to review all of these annual financial reports. They go through the checklist, they make sure that we've answered all the questions, met all the requirements, and if they see anything or have any recommendations for improvement, they provide us with comments. And the reviewers this year had 0 comments, and it's the first time in, I think I've only got 19 years, Shannon might have one more year than I do. But it's the first time I've ever seen no comments on an annual financial report. So I just want to say congratulations to staff and Davis Farr as well for doing a great job responding to comments and preparing the annual financial report for 2020. And hopefully we'll get the award again this year. So we'll get another achievement in excellence, or certificate of achievement for excellence in financial reporting for 2021. And with that, staff recommends that the board consider and accept the 2021 comprehensive annual financial report. And I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you, Wes. That was a comprehensive report. Awesome job. I'll open it up to any questions or comments my colleagues might have.
I'd just like to say congratulations. This was clearly a lot of work. Thank you for presenting it in a comprehensive but easily comprehensible, if that's a word, fashion. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Director Arthur?
Yeah, I'd also like to commend staff and their consultants. Very, very good job, and I would make the motion to move staff's recommendation.
Okay, great. Is there a second?
Second that?
Okay, we have a motion by Director Ellithart to move staff's recommendation, and a second by Director Pinnick. And I just, this item came to the Finance Committee recently, and I'll just echo what I said there. Kudos to everybody involved, from Shannon and Wes and the entire team. And it's, you know, my exact words, I think, at the Finance Committee meeting was that we have full trust and confidence in our finance team, but it's always reassuring as a board member that to have a kind of a third party take a look at the finances for us and audit them. And then when we get these, you know, these phenomenal results from that audit, it's always nice to know from a board perspective. So thank you. And with that, I'll cast my vote. And the motion passes unanimously. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shannon.
Okay. Item 2.3, redistricting process update.
Yeah, I'll kick that off. But first, I'd like to thank Wes and Shannon, too. Anytime you see a team with 39 combined years of professional experience go through a process and not receive a single comment, the first time they've ever seen it in their combined careers, that's pretty amazing. Yeah, so nice job. Thank you. Yeah, so item 2.3 is redistricting. So every time, when you have a public agency that's broken down by geographical divisions and have elected officers, every time you get new census data, you're required to look at the breakdown. How did the population change within your boundaries? So that's what we're here to do today, to kind of talk about that process. And Assistant General Manager Gumpel will provide the board with an update on that. So James, take it away.
Thank you, Glenn. President Sinella, members of the board, I'm going to share my screen and give you an update on the presentation. Can everybody see the presentation?
Yes.
Great. So redistricting process, this is an update, and you've actually seen this same presentation a couple times, so we have updated it slightly. So really quick here, advance it. So as you remember, we had a starting point. We came and presented originally in October, and again gave you an update. And basically, we're looking at the existing census data. And then initially, we expected to do an outreach, and if you see these original dots, originally we wanted to do it before the end of November, probably prior to the holidays. We're a little late on that, but we're still scheduled to send it out in December. And then as far as the work product, we started in October, and we plan to be finished basically early next year with the work product. And it's with the public outreach, we're still planning on a February public hearing to get comments from the public, and then follow that up with a March public hearing, and then, of course, adoption. And everything needs to be submitted prior to April 17th. So you can see there's been a little slight change in schedule just because it took us a little longer to get some of the information. But however, in general, we're still on track. So as a reminder here, the last things that the board saw was basically in 2016, we had an update to our division boundaries, and this is the populations that were put in. At that time, we didn't know, based on the census data, because it wasn't out, where our 2021 numbers, or really our 2020 numbers would sit. So since then, we got the update. So with the update here, here's the 2016, that remains the same. The 2021 numbers are now been put in. And I actually added a table, and the next slide will actually update, give you a little update. I'll zoom up on this so you can see how this compares to the average and also compares to 2021. So really quickly, the 2020 census population data overall is equal to or better, division by division, than the 2016 estimated population. Just as a reminder, in 2016, the estimate was based on the 2010 census and then projected forward. The 2020 census data is actually from the 2020 census, obviously. So you can see the different divisions. You can see the population within each division. This is without changing any division boundaries. You can see the average and the difference. And then that difference broken out into percentage based on the average. And then this last column here is the percentage difference in 2016, which is an estimate based on the 2016 estimated average. So it's basically an apples and apples comparison. You can see there's some deviation, a little greater in Division 1, much less in Division 2, a little greater in Division 3, less in Division 4, and less in Division 5. Staff went ahead and asked BBK to check if the current divisions without modification meets the requirements set forth by redistricting. And BVK reviewed this and said, based on the population numbers and the existing division boundaries, the current division boundaries meet the statutes and would suffice. Staff is actually looking today for consensus for a no change to division boundaries based on the analysis of the last census data. And our next steps, if that's the consensus of the board, would be to move forward with our public outreach. And what that would look like is sending out the individual division maps with an overall explaining that there's going to be no change in divisions moving forward to the public, and working with Chris's team on that outreach. With that, this is a very brief presentation since it was mainly an update, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, James. I'll open it up to any questions.
Explained it very well.
Okay.
Thank you for that presentation, James. I do have a question regarding the bullet point that said that based on BBK's recommendation, there's no change. I'm wondering what the criteria were that sort of satisfied that. I know that there are different criteria depending on whether or not you're talking about assembly districts or congressional districts or supervisorial districts, including trying to keep communities of interest together. For example, we have a large Latinx population concentrated in some areas of San Marcos. So I'd just like a little bit of clarity around, was that looked at, and do we have some data on that?
Sure, we do have some data on the Latino community in there, and I actually, if you don't mind, I just got the data, and it's rough because I haven't been able to plot them into the voting precincts at this time. But so if you don't mind looking at the raw data, let me bring it up. Okay, So again, this is very rough, and I literally got these numbers. First off, can you see it?
No.
Okay, let me reshare it. All right, now can you see it?
Yes.
Great. So I got these numbers essentially about 4:45. So, and currently we are still need to plot them into the voting precincts to make sure we're not double counting any of the population. But this is from the census data, and the way the census data gives us the numbers, we still have to match them into the voting precincts and within the division boundaries. So these are rough numbers, but they're not going to be significantly off. And you can see the different divisions and and these numbers are population of Latino population within those divisions. Primarily, when looking at the maps, again, I haven't plotted completely. I'm going to move up to one of the mapping slides to kind of show you. The largest concentration is really along the corridors along San Marcos Boulevard and Rancho Santa Fe Road, which primarily is in Division 2, and the numbers also vet that out. The existing division boundaries, also the way we work them, meet the voting precincts. And for the most part, the communities stay within the voting precincts, although there are anomalies where you have pockets outside into different voting precincts. I don't know if that completely answers your question. I don't have all the information to plot it, but my intent is to try and get additional information and plot some of those areas, if possible, prior to the public hearing.
And Director Boyd Hodgson, I think Nick's prepared to give a legal perspective on that too.
Okay, thank
That
you.
part of your question.
So there are a number of legal criteria that apply to developing redistricting maps. First and foremost, as James talked about, one of the most primary ones is keeping the numbers as close to equal as possible in the districts. The way that the courts generally look at it is that districts that are more or less within 10 points of each other, a variation of less than 10, would mean generally that the maps are presumptively valid. The courts have approved sub-districts with variation up to 15%, but it has to be strongly justified by secondary considerations like topography, geography, communities of interest, other types of factors that go into it. So keeping the numbers as close as possible, and I think that's what James is referring to, is that based on the information that was provided to us about the numbers, the variation was felt to be within the legally required range. There is another dimension, and that is the Federal Voting Rights Act, which basically requires that agencies that are drawing maps not dilute minority votes necessarily in a way through how they are redistricted. Whether a map does or does not do that, it's highly dependent on a number of various factors. So it's something that we can work with staff on to verify and make sure of. One of the things that can sometimes be done is looking at the data to see if you can develop a minority majority district within the data, and to do that. And that would sometimes, again, depending on those other legal factors that might be at play, insulate the agency from challenges of vote dilution. Essentially, if you can create a district that has a minority majority representation, there might be an obligation to do that, or it might be recommended to do that in order to protect from the legal risk of doing that. And that's a level of analysis that hasn't been done yet, I don't believe, but the discussion in the presentation today was about the numbers themselves, and the numbers that James and his team have put together.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments?
No, covered very well.
Okay, James, thank you again. And that is just updates, so we don't have to vote on it.
Staff is looking for some consensus to move forward with public outreach with the existing boundaries, understanding that they may change based on the information coming in and also comments from the public.
Yeah, so even though we're not proposing any changes in the boundaries, there is still a public process we need to go forward with. So we just want to make sure the consensus of the board is to move forward with that public process in a way that recommends not changing the boundaries. So that's all we'd be looking for.
I'm supportive of that.
Full speed ahead.
I'm not supportive of making the recommendation that we don't change the boundaries. I think just presenting the information to the public is fine to involve the public, but I'm not supportive of necessarily saying that we plan or are looking at not changing the boundaries. Like that's the default.
Having attended and spoken at one of the districting reboundary meetings for the county, I do remember they had at least one or two, maybe even 3 or 4 different map options that they were presenting as, I don't know if they're recommendations or just options, but if we're going to provide some sort of outreach to the public, I mean, I feel we have to give them at least something, right? To kind of, a starting point at least, or a staff recommendation or something. I mean, maybe the first meeting we don't do anything, we just have them come, if anybody wants to speak to us about it, and then after that, I think at some point, we're gonna have to take the lead and say, here's an option, here's 2 options, here's 3 options, whatever it is, but I feel weird just going to the public and just saying that we're letting you know that we're doing this redistricting process, but there's no other further guidance.
Well, these numbers alone, that what he just showed us, even this slide and the one previous, I mean, to show that to the public alone seems sufficient, to me at least. I mean, which I am, I'm a ratepayer in a public, and if I see that, hey, numbers are even closer this year than, so I think if you just show 2020 and 2021, and here's where we're at within the 10%, we're 5.9, 4.3. I don't know, just these 2 slides alone seemed like it would suffice. I don't know if we need to show a bunch of different maps and different, get the Thomas Brothers out. But I don't know, these 2 slides that I was shown seemed like would be sufficient.
I think having the information presented, similar to what Director Pennick said, I think that would be important, showing, yes, that we have, similarly, the population is similar across the different precincts, but there are a lot of people that are participating in the redistricting process that are very concerned about the concentration and the Latinx community, being diluted or being concentrated, and showing the numbers that it looks like we already have, which I thank you, James, for pulling that together. Mm-hmm. I think that's information that the public might want to know. And, if nobody participates, then nobody participates, and nobody comes forward and says, this is really important. But at least we've given them the option and shown the information.
If it pleases the board, we could just send out the existing maps with the existing information without a recommendation that we're changing anything, just letting them know that we're going through the process, and if they have any concerns, we're going to be having a public meeting and also a public hearing, and also to give staff those concerns ahead of time.
Yeah, I think if I can add, I think that's part of the value of the proposed 2-step process. We can hear from the community at the first meeting, and based on the input and feedback, we can present different options the second time. I think it would be important to at the first meeting, to tell people by just the numbers alone, as Director Pennick was saying, by the numbers alone, it doesn't indicate a requirement to change the district boundaries. That doesn't mean we're proposing not to change them, but it's saying we don't have to change them. So at least it would let the community know the baseline from pure compliance with the law means we don't have to change it, but we're here to listen. And if there's a large contingent of any special interest that comes to that meeting and says we think we're underrepresented or that group's overrepresented, then that would be the opportunity to listen to that at that time. And also one more thing before I yield the floor, and maybe I think I need Nick's help on this, but different political agencies have different requirements. So I think special district rules are different than like a city or a board of supervisors. And Nick, I don't know if you want to touch on those.
There are some different requirements. Generally, it's more about procedures in terms of, I think cities are required to have 4 public hearings prior to adopting maps. Special districts is the lowest in terms of the required steps in the process. It's only 2 public hearings. And there are a handful of additional requirements that for example, cities or counties might have. But some of the basic legal obligations are really the same across, no matter the agency, the equal votes, relatively speaking, and then compliance with the Federal Voting Rights Act and California Voting Rights Act.
Ms. Martin, if you'd like to step up to the microphone, we'd love to hear from you.
Yes, again, Gail Martin. I'm concerned that it sounds like Mr. Gumbel is still right now receiving information, and I wonder how much longer will he expect information to come in. That would be good to know, and give him a timeline for when he can expect to then put that information into the database and be able to give a much more informed report of the status of the new census numbers. Thank you.
President Sinella, if I may, and I'll ask James to add on to this if he needs to, but I don't think we've received any new data. We're just processing and slicing and dicing the data that we already have. So we talked about the Latinx community right now, but it could, maybe there's a group that's going to say seniors are misrepresented or whatever. So we can slice and dice data all day long, but I think that's something we'll pick up hopefully in the first meeting. If there's a group that feels that they're not being represented, then we'll probably hear that loud and clear at that meeting.
In the
That's
past, have you heard of
absolutely
a group that has not been represented?
In the time I've been here, there's never been issues. We haven't redistricted in the time I've been here to be, up front, but I haven't heard any complaints from any groups that feel that they're unfairly represented in the service area.
I don't think the Voting Rights Act was part of the criteria before.
You're live.
Thank you. I don't think the Voting Rights Act was part of the criteria before as well.
True.
Okay, James, you got what you need?
I believe so, and just to reiterate, we'll go ahead and start the public process, send out the PR process, send out the information, just explain that here are the existing boundaries, and here's the existing population in those existing boundaries, and seek out input if there's any communities of interest, or any comments on it, and also give them information on when we're going to be holding that first public hearing. From there, we can receive those comments and make adjustments prior to the second public hearing.
Sounds like a plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a comment on that before we leave, because the word seek kind of scared. I think the biggest thing is, as long as we're being transparent, this is what we see. But if we seek, there's a saying, seek and ye shall find. If we're looking for a group that wants to be represented or thinks they're misrepresented, we'll probably find them. But I think if we're transparent, we put the information out here, this is what we're doing, I think that's good enough. But if we go like knocking on doors and saying, hey, do you feel misrepresented? How can you? It just seems like we're just gonna go down a rabbit hole there. So I don't know, and I know James didn't mean like go seeking and looking and knocking on doors and making sure you feel represented, but be transparent. This is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it. Put it out for the public, but and leave it at that.
No,
hopefully you understand what I'm saying.
I do, and I share your concern to a certain extent. I will say, just having participated in the county's efforts, there's no, similar to our next item, there's no perfect solution, and they have dozens and dozens of people who come and speak about their various maps at every single meeting, and there's different interests, right? Different groups, different interests, and different opinions. And so even if we do get to the point where we have some feedback, doesn't necessarily mean we're going to be able to find something that makes everybody happy or works perfectly for everyone. So we'll have to do the best we can if and when that case comes before us. But I definitely hear you.
President Sinella, if I may add to address Director Pennick's comment, staff won't be doing any kind of targeted outreach. We'll be doing kind of broad-based mail stuffers, advertisement on our website. So we won't be trying to find any particular group. We'll just put it out there and say, come on to the meeting. Perfect. Everyone's welcome.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, let's move on to item 2.4.
Thank you.
the refunded proceeds from the resolution of the lawsuit between San Diego County Water Authority and Metropolitan Water District of Southern California.
Yeah, I'll take that item, President Sinella. So County Water Authority recently resolved several lawsuits with Metropolitan regarding Met's rate setting process. And the lawsuits covered the rate setting period between 2015 and 2017. MWD recently paid the Water Authority $35.9 million in damages, and Vallecitos' share of that money is $1,248,828.17. This item was presented to the board at the November 17th meeting. Several options for disbursement of those funds were provided to the board, and after significant discussion, the board opted to refer this item to the Finance Committee. The Finance Committee did meet and discuss this item at their meeting on November 22nd, and after considering several options, the committee recommended that the board return the lawsuit proceeds to our customers in the same fashion that we did the last time that we got the money back from the Water Authority. And previously, the board opted to refund the money as a bill credit to customers of record based on meter size. That was the method that the board approved at that point. So if we use that method again, single-family customers would receive a credit of approximately $43.28. This would be a one-time credit up front in the beginning and as soon as we could process the refunds. And I said approximately because that number is just an estimate. The actual refund would be based on the customer meter count as of tonight. If the board took that action tonight and said, yeah, let's do it by meter size, tomorrow morning I'll get with the finance team, we'll freeze the database, so to speak, and those number of meter equivalents would be what we would use as the denominator to divide the proceeds by. So that number may change a little from $43.28, but I think we're talking pennies if it changes at all. It'd be very close. So we're not looking for necessary approval of a certain amount. We're approving a methodology, and then staff will work on that. That method is pretty staff intensive. Last time it was a lessons learned, but I think we did learn a lot through that, and I think it'll work a lot smoother this time. Last time it took us about a month, or almost a month and a half to figure everything out and to identify all the customers and to calculate all the credits. So we're guessing it'll be about 30 days again to get that out there. And then we would start crediting customers on their bill as their billing cycle came up. We wouldn't issue a special credit, it would just be on their next billing cycle. I just want to point out that there was a speaker at the Finance Committee meeting, and that speaker did request that customers who are not on the bill, such as residents of mobile home parks, also share in the refund. And I'd be happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Thank you, Glenn. And I do have one speaker on this item, Ms. Martin.
Yes, once again, Gail Martin. Regarding this second refund proceeds, none of the other 12 North County water agencies in the region are giving refunds because of the potential legal conflict with our California Constitution in giving away the public's money to other members of the public. Vallecitos is the only one doing this, and I fear it's just to get votes. I strongly urge you to offset the upcoming rate increase for a year. Thank you.
Thank you. And this did come before the Finance Committee, as everybody knows from our last meeting, and it was discussed in detail, including the legal aspects of returning the money back to the customers. And I'll ask one for the third time, I think, for a legal opinion on that. Are we, because above all, we want to return money to the people who, you know, it's their money, it's not the district's money. But we also don't want to break any laws in doing so. Are we legally compliant by doing this?
So there's sort of two aspects to it. One is that it could be given back through a future offset or as a credit, but ultimately the result is the same, whether it's a credit for basically a future offset or through a credit now to back to the customers. So I think our staff has worked with the district on this. I haven't been personally involved, but I think Our rate and fee staff has talked to staff in the past about it, and the district does have various options that are legally sound to do it. Also, the fact that it is generating a refund, of course, is a relatively low-risk concept in terms of rate and fee type of issues.
Okay, thank you. And after the Finance Committee received those presentations and heard public comment, you know, I think we were really at least I was really open-minded to looking at other options and trying to find a way to return a greater amount to our mobile home residents who are not directly customers of the district. And it was something that I went into that meeting with, you know, the hope that we would find some sort of solution that would work better. And unfortunately, as we found the first time we went through this process, and then also the night at the last board meeting when we discussed this prior to going back to the Finance Committee, we came up with the same kind of frustrations that there really was no good solution. And even if we did choose the other option of offsetting future rate increases, there was no guarantees that the mobile home management companies would return any more of that offset, you know, to the actual end users any differently than they're going to do or not do with regards to the refund. And so, as we mentioned before, this methodology, while not perfect, provides us an avenue to return money back to as many customers, really all of our direct customers, 100% of our direct customers. And that's, again, it's the best solution. And I'll turn it over to Director Boyd Hodgson. She was my colleague on the Finance Committee as well. If you have any comments or anything you want to add, or.
I think you articulated it well, and I think we're aligned that this is not a perfect solution. The most perfect solution is too labor intensive, and that is to go and backtrack and find every customer that paid into the pool at that time, which is not realistic and would be foolish. It is the case that this does the most good for the most people. There are unfortunately customers that will not be seeing as much of a benefit as others. And we did brainstorm and try to arrive at some creative solutions. Some things that we talked about were ensuring that our PR outreach around this lets folks know, so that, you know, explains the situation well. So if a customer wants to educate themselves and then talk to their management company, they're able to do that with confidence. And I think that that's sort of the limit that we can provide, because they're not our direct customers. But I'm comfortable with the direction that we agreed to, and I'm glad that we're bringing it forward to the rest of the board in case there are some other thoughts or opinions.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Oh.
I will just also add, Mr. President, I meant to mention this earlier, the solution that is proposed before the board, as acknowledged, there is an element of proportionality to it because it is based on meter size. The concerns might be different if it was just a flat refund across the board to all customers, but it does have that element of proportionality to help kind of mirror the water use.
Thank you. Any other directors have any questions or comments? Okay, is there any motions?
I'll move the recommendation to provide the one-time credit.
And I'll second that. And so we have a motion by Director Boyd Hodgson and a second by President Sinella to basically do the one-time credit as we did before. If there's no other discussion or questions, then we will go ahead and take a vote. And the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Martin. Okay. Moving on to item 2.5, adjustment to general manager's compensation.
Yeah, President Sinella, as that relates to my employment agreement, I'm going to let Nick take the lead on this.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. So the board recently conducted a performance evaluation for General Manager Pruitt. Following the performance evaluation, the board and the general manager engaged in negotiations regarding potential changes to the general manager's compensation package, and the negotiated changes are being presented this evening for approval. Under the Brown Act, an agency must provide a verbal summary of a proposed board action on whether the salary or salary schedule or benefits of local agency executives, and obviously in this situation, the general manager would fall into that category. The three proposed changes to the general manager's existing employment agreement would do three things. One is provide a one-time contribution to the general manager's health retirement account in the amount of $13,287.20, excuse me. Second, allow the general manager to convert the first 160 hours of vacation leave per calendar year to a health retirement account contribution. And then finally, to increase the allotment of executive leave from 40 hours per year to 50 hours per year. Further details about the existing salary and benefit levels for the general manager are contained in the written staff report. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. We have a question by Director Althart.
Yeah, in the discussion portion of the package, it says, change, number 3 says increase the allotment of executive leave from 40 to 80 hours. Just want to point out that.
Okay, it's supposed to be 50, so yeah, I fully understand that it's 50.
Just to confirm, yes, the proposal is 50.
Great. Good catch, Director Althart. Any other questions, comments? Okay. Do we need to make a motion on this? If so, I'll make a motion to approve staff's recommendation and the presentation by legal counsel on item 2.5 to approve the adjustments to the general manager's compensation as presented. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, great. There's a motion by President Snell and a second by Director Ellertharp to approve the recommendation for the adjustment to the general manager's compensation. If there's no other discussion, then we will take a vote. And the motion passes unanimously. Well-deserved, General Manager Prum. Thank you for everything that you do.
Thank you.
Okay, that ends our action items this evening, and we'll go on to the General Manager's report.
Yeah, just a few items. So we have completed the state arrearages application. That's the program the state put in place to help customers, residents of the state that fell behind in their utility bills. So that ensures that we're eligible for the funding from the state for that program. The amount we expect to receive is $276,082.05, and there will be 336 customers that will benefit from that money that we received, and those will be bill credits. We expect to receive the funds from the state in approximately 30 days, and the requirement of the arrearages program is that we have to refund the money within 60 days of receipt of the funds. So we've got about 90 days, we think. Within 90 days, we'll have all the money given to those 336 customers. And I want to say thanks to Wes and his team for pursuing those funds. It's pretty rigorous. State puts these programs together, and to their credit, they do a really nice job making sure that everyone's eligible and qualifies. Just maybe mention, the board just directed us to refund that County Water Authority lawsuit proceeds, and now some customers will be getting this state arrearages, so there may be some confusion in a good way from some of our customers. Some may get both, the state arrearages and the CWA refund. Some may get one or the other. Some may get neither, depending on how recent of a customer they are and other factors. So we'll try to make it clear as we start putting these bill credits on the bills to make sure people understand where it came from and why and how it may relate to something else. I'm kind of hoping that we can get the CWA refund done before we actually start doing the credits for the state arrearages program, but we'll see how things come together. Just wanted you to know in case you get any feedback on that. Just a real quick note, I think I mentioned before that we're receiving these Tesla batteries at 6 of our sites. And these batteries will provide operational resilience and reduce our operating costs. That's a good thing. And I just want to inform you that a couple of our sites are already under construction, this site included. They're out there in the yard working to install those batteries. So hopefully within a couple of months, we'll start to see the benefits of those programs. And thanks to James and Susan Bowman, because it's a lot of work to go through that. But it's millions of dollars of benefit we're getting from this. So it's a really good thing.
Those are just donated?
Yeah, it's a program. I think Tesla there's state funding.
Right.
And so they got access to these, and they kind of reached out to the utility agencies and other emergency response organizations and went through some kind of competitive process. Basically had to apply, and then we were successful at 6 of our sites, so it's.
So our cost is just like install and hook up?
Yeah, so we have to provide, like, we'll do inspection, it'll be kind of our staff hours, but the equipment's provided, they do the construction, the installation.
Oh, really?
They provide certain term of support for it. After that, then it's ours to maintain. There's some financial considerations we have to absorb, but they're really small in comparison to the benefit that we're
Not
getting.
millions.
Yeah, it's a really good deal.
I have a quick question about that.
Yes.
I know that we've talked about electrifying our fleet. If we do go down that route and we end up buying electric vehicles, is that a place where they can charge? Can we benefit like that as well?
Yeah, we probably could. James is online still, so maybe James could pipe in on that. My understanding is the system that we're getting wasn't sized for future improvements like electrification of fleet, but there may be some side benefits. So James, if you have something to add?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. So the existing system is based on our existing usage, and it's based on resiliency. It's through a resiliency grant through SCG&E in the state that came basically out of if you're going to shut down essential utilities, they need to have some ability to back themselves up to provide services. And you could utilize them any way you want, but they're sized for our existing systems, and each one will provide some sort of resiliency, whether it's days or hours, depending on the usage and the time of year. Absolutely, it will provide a benefit. It will provide some savings to our customers because we could use the batteries during some peak times to relieve the grid. And we could also, if we end up electrifying the fleet, utilize the electricity rates in the off-peak periods while having storage in case of emergency. So in other words, if there was an outage, we could still provide electricity to some of our fleet, but we'd have to manage that site by site.
Yeah, and with that emergency preparedness being the biggest benefit, the last thing we want to do is drain those batteries by charging all of our fleet and then find out the power goes out and our batteries are depleted. So we'll have to manage that, and we'll always be looking at the weather conditions and the red flag alerts and all that to make sure we use it judiciously.
So this is a backup, not a primary source of energy?
Yeah, it's primarily used for backup, but you are allowed to use it for operational needs, to peak shave, to be able to pump off peak, things like that in your discretion, but you can't do it to the complete detriment of the primary reason, which is emergency preparedness.
Okay, got it.
So the last item I wanted to say is just a reminder that we'll be convening the Finance Corporation immediately after this meeting. It's easy to forget and just everyone pack up and go home, but as soon as we wrap up this meeting, we'll come back together, but you won't hear the same report on the CAFR and the audit, so.
What time those guys getting here?
What's that?
What time is the Finance Corporation getting here?
Yeah, they should be arriving soon, yeah.
Okay. Let's see here. Any legal counsel report?
No report, thank you, Mr. President.
Super. How about Water Authority?
Okay, the Water Authority had the regular board meeting on November 18th. It was a pretty routine meeting, just a couple items of note. The board adopted a resolution authorizing the Water Authority to enter into an agreement with the State of California Department of Water Resources to receive funds for the San Vicente Pump Storage Energy Project, and authorizing the general manager to execute an agreement to receive those funds. And I think the funds are about $18 million for pretty much for pre-construction type activities, design, environmental issues, and those kind of things. Secondly, the board authorized the general manager to negotiate and enter into agreements for the Water Authority's water storage assets at the semi-tropic water bank in the Central Valley. And the third thing was the board approved sponsoring, co-sponsoring, or supporting the following legislative proposals. A, streamline the operator's certification process and allow for flexibility during extenuating circumstances. And B, to support water rate affordability for low-income ratepayers and adopt state and federal priorities for 2022. That's my report.
Thank you, Director Hotharp. The Encina Board of Directors meeting, we haven't met since our last board meeting, which we reported out on. And the Policy and Finance Committee that I serve on meets on the 7th, and I don't know about the Capital Improvement Committee. Is there a way we can Okay, so that was a long way of saying that there's nothing to report out at this meeting for Encina. Any standing committees meet? I got a short report for finance, but, any others? Okay, finance committee met, as, I mentioned earlier, we talked about the return of the refund for the lawsuit money from the water authority, which we've already covered in detail. We also talked about the comprehensive financial report and the audit, which you all received the same report that we did, so I'm not gonna cover that. And then the third item that we discussed at the finance committee was the upcoming cost of service exercise that we're going to go through. And as I know that you've all received some correspondence from the general manager about coordinating dates and whatnot to have that first workshop. There was three potential options for rate structures and cost of service analysis that was presented to the finance committee. I'm not gonna bore you with all the details because you're gonna get them in detail at the workshop. But there are three different options that staff is presenting to us to consider. And I hate to almost even say this, but from what we're looking at with even all the options is that it looks like, budget pending, that it's gonna be a pretty minimal request from staff for a rate increase next year, which is nice. And I'll leave it at that without getting people's hopes up, so. With that, if there was no other standing committees that met, then is there any director's reports on conferences, seminars, any of that stuff? I attended the CSDA quarterly dinner meeting last week, and they had a panel presenters that presented on the current status of the labor market that I think both the private sector and the public sector, some of the challenges that we're facing. And there was nothing that was like aha moment that was presented. I think most of the challenges have been pretty well discussed in the media and if amongst employers. And it was interesting. They were talking about how the younger generations they don't want to commute to work. That's one of the things that they're that hiring managers and companies are challenged with is finding ways to be more flexible with folks working from home or just not having to commute as far or every single day. And then there's just a kind of a shift with that perhaps occurred during COVID that people have kind of are looking at work-life balance a little bit differently, and their priorities are a little bit different, and so they're not staying on the job. There's a lot of folks that are leaving their careers, and recruiting their replacements is more difficult. So that was the gist of the presentation. And any other report outs? No. Okay. In our board packets on item 4.1 for information only is the quarterly board expenses. If there's any discussion on that? Okay. And then, any director's comments or future agenda items? Yep.
So last time we met, I suggested that we might do something for the holidays as a charitable event or drive. And we talked about a couple of things, but I don't think, since it wasn't on the agenda tonight, I guess we're not doing anything as a board or as an agency, I guess.
We don't, staff doesn't have anything
Okay.
in particular, no.
So I personally am collecting period products, and I can put that on my website, on my Facebook page, for charity. Period poverty is something that is real. It prevents people from attending school. And so I will be collecting those products. There's an Amazon list, and you can go on and contribute to that if you would like. And I will put that on my Facebook page, my unofficial Facebook page. It's not affiliated with the district.
What type of products?
Period products, menstrual products.
All right.
Okay.
That's what I thought, yeah, that's what I thought you said.
That's exactly what I said.
Yeah, being the only male in my household, I know that's an important thing, so.
And they're expensive.
Yes, they are. And so I'll definitely be visiting your Facebook page and making a donation.
Thank you.
Okay, any other future agenda items, comments? Okay, and then with that, we'll go to item 6.1, which is adjournment. Thank you, everybody. And thank you to staff who participated and presented. tonight, and if there is, I can't see, but if there is any members of the community that attended, thank you for joining us tonight.